Now, there is, I suspect, a very special Hitchens archive somewhere out there in some corner of YouTube, so let me know if you find it, will you? Quote from your book, "Religion has run out of justifications thanks to the telescope and the microscope." I mean, you're simply arguing that...
It's a bit simplistic, that, isn't it?
Yes, it is a bit. But you are simply arguing that science has killed off religion, is that right?
I'm saying I think it's incompatible with. It's the two ways of thinking as well as the two modes of discovery that follow are incompatible with it, irreconcilable. Yes, I do think so. But it's a bit crude to say that the microscope and the telescope alone will do it. I was thinking more about what we found out about our own human nature, namely the microscope. We know a lot more about what makes us morally and ethically the way we are, and what our kinship is with the lower animals as well. From the telescope, we know more about the origins of our cosmos. It's a shorthand for what I was trying to enlarge upon this evening.
Yep. The problem
might have
is,
to revisit that.
The problem is there are going to remain fundamental questions which science almost certainly will never answer. For example, if the origin of the universe was the Big Bang, what caused that to happen? How could the entire universe simply pop into existence magically for no reason at all? I mean, because science won't be able to answer those questions, religion will always seek to.
Well, I think it's the other way around, actually. I mean, the reason why religion is such a great argument to be having is that it is our first attempt at making sense. I mean, religion is what you get before philosophy. It's our first attempt at philosophy. Most philosophers started off as religious, as did many ethicists. It's our first attempt at cosmology, first attempt at healthcare, by means of miracle, alas, but still. And prayer. It's our first attempt to make sense. And science doesn't completely replace all those questions, but it says that there's no need for a supernatural attempt to answer them. In other words, if you say, because we don't know what the scientific origins of the Big Bang are, which Father Lemaitre didn't know any more than I do, or Einstein did, there must be a supernatural explanation. That isn't logical at all. And if there was a supernatural progenitor, where did that supernatural progenitor come from? Who created that? So you get nothing out of it but an infinite regression, and I think the meanest application to science is more satisfying than that, and much more likely to yield an answer that you can at least argue about. Whereas if you're simply told you have a creator and he has a plan for you, it explains nothing, and it has reactionary implications, because it suggests there are people who can't just tell you what to do. There are plenty of those as it is. People who say, God tells me to tell you what to do. And that's slavery.
Incidentally, you make this point yourself, don't you, about this infinite regression of creators. And in fact, Aristotle concluded that the logic of all of this would necessitate 47 or 55 gods.
Yes.
What's the mathematics?
I have no idea. There's a lot about Aristotle I don't understand. And some of it's in that song.
Yes.
From Woolloomooloo?
Well, I think it was actually the University of Woolloomooloo. Yes.
Woolloomooloo, so I knew I was pronouncing it. Yeah, yes, it is.
Aristotle was a bugger for the bottle.
Yeah, Plato, yes. Never mind. John Stuart Mill, of his own free will, on half a pint of shandy, got spectacularly ill. But Plato, they say, could stick it away. Half a crate of whiskey every day. And of course Aristotle was a bugger for the bottle. Thomas Hobbes was a slave to his dram, and René Descartes was pissed as a fart. I drink, therefore I am.
Okay. If my wife was...
How the hell did that happen?
Yeah, I should really know.
Yes, Socrates himself is particularly missed. Lovely little thinker, but bugger when he's pissed.
It's something about the raising of the wrist.
There's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach you about the raising of the wrist.
Yes, okay. Let's get serious.
Immanuel Kant was a real piss hand. Very seldom stable. Martin Heidegger was a boozy beggar. He could think you under the table. David Hume could out-consume. Schopenhauer and Hegel.
Hegel, yes, there you go.
And Wittgenstein was a boozy swine who was just as sloshed as Schlegel. I think that's all they wrote.
As you can see, Christopher's widely read. Okay, fast forward to today. Acutely aware that they will never be able to answer some of these big questions about existence, some scientists have come up with the idea of quantum cosmology. And it seems that, and I think you almost alluded to this yourself, that quantum physics almost has a theological dimension now. Could this become, in fact, the new religion?
Well, I think that there are signs of, I think that, look, to back up, I think that the temptation to worship has to be admitted as being innate in us. I mean, there are very few people who are born without it. I think I may be one of them, but I mean, I don't say I'm completely immune to superstition either. I mean, I'm a primate. For that reason, I don't think religion is eradicable, or that it would be desirable if it could be eradicated. I think it needs to be, if you like, domesticated, brought under control. That very quotation from Marx that I used in his critique of Hegel shows that he understands that this is a product of the human soul, if you wish, or human personality. It's not just the result of unresolved material contradictions. Thus, it's been folly for any communist regime to try and put it down, to put that shortly. So yes, it's possible that people could become worshippers of physics, yeah, or the quantum. Just as in my view, and it's beginning to worry me, in some of the green and environmental movements, there's a feeling that we've brought punishment upon ourselves. You know, that we've sinned, and that there are people who look upon, I haven't been into this Gaia stuff very much, but who look upon the planet as in some sense something that needs to be propitiated and placated. I can hear some echoes of this in some apparently modern and reason-based and evidence-based movements. Yep. So yeah, it's always there, and you always have to be on the lookout for it.
I'm actually talking about physicians, well, not physicians, but the quantum physicians, yeah. I suppose you would call them cosmologists. Put very simply, the idea is that things can just happen spontaneously. Particles can pop into existence without warning and disappear without warning, and the corollary of that, according to Paul Davies, among others, is that the entire universe could have just popped into existence.
I'm reading this book about the quantum now and about Heisenberg. There was this discovery that it seems that a particle doesn't so much pop into existence, though, but it can be there and then be there, reassembled, with no one knowing where it was in between, which is like a poltergeist or something, except that it's not, because there aren't any poltergeists and you can't measure them, whereas with this, there's a chance. I haven't got very far with the book yet, but there's a chance of it yielding to analysis. It's certainly the only method we have had any luck with in the past.
And one potential...
And of course, we don't like to think of ourselves as random. It's not in us to feel that we're just an accident, any more than we can picture our own extinction, let alone the extinction of our whole species. But it has to be faced. It's no good saying, because that thought is depressing, we should banish it in favor of something more uplifting. Because that means you get all the bad news anyway, and in the meantime you've been fooling yourself.
Let's go to someone you talked about during your talk, but we didn't go into any detail, Stephen Jay Gould and his work on fossils in the so-called Burgess Shale deep in the Canadian Rockies, which actually helped to establish the origins of human life, pinning it back onto this tiny little creature called the Pikaia gracilens. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Burgess Shale is this, some of you will, I'm sure, already know this, but it's a place in the Canadian Rockies where essentially half of a mountain fell away. So you get a side view, a cross-section of a mountain looked at from the side. Very useful, because you see all these stems and branches of life and the fossil record. You're not drilling down for it, you're surveying it like that. Scientists go there in a big way. It's the best example we have. And what's very striking about it is how many of the branches and sprigs go nowhere. They just taper off. Gould, in fact, says it's silly to think of evolution as a tree. It's much more useful to think of it as a big bush. It goes in all directions. A tree seems to have a